British author Sophie Kinsella first hit the top of the bestseller list with her 2000 debut novel, Confessions of a Shopaholic. Now beloved internationally for her charming combination of humor and heart, she has sold more than 45 million books worldwide, including 8 additional books in the Shopaholic series and 10 standalone novels. In Sophie's latest novel, The Party Crasher, lovable main character Effie is not invited to her father's glamorous girlfriend's party of the year, but that's certainly not going to stop her from turning the celebration into dysfunctional family chaos. For today's conversation, Sophie is joined by novelist Amanda Ayer Ward, New York Times bestselling author of The Jet Setters, Sleep Toward Heaven, and 6 other novels. Copies of The Party Crasher and all of Sophie's and Amanda's hit novels are available from Left Bank Books, St. Louis's premier independent bookstore.
Hello, Sophie. I'm so thrilled to be here with you this morning.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. This is amazing. And I just want to sort of bow down to the God of technology who has allowed us to connect, through the ether. I'm always feeling it's like a small miracle, these big distance get-togethers. It's like magic. So hi.
Hi, I feel the same way. So we are talking today about The Party Crasher, which is such an incredible book. And I hope you could take a few minutes telling us about your newest standalone novel.
Okay, well, thank you so much. It is about a party. And I think that part of me when I was writing it, which was during lockdown, was thinking, where would we like to be right now? I've always written escapist fiction. And in this book, I was like escaping into a party. So I really
escaping your house?
Exactly, into the kind of party which we can enjoy. So I wanted it not just to be a party, but a kind of grand, opulent, kind of super fun party with like lots of glamour to it. So it's a really glamorous party. It's a family party. But I wanted my main character to be estranged from everybody else giving the party and to end up eavesdropping and creeping around the party as like a fly on the wall. So I set up a family situation where you have quite a disconnected, quite dysfunctional, broken family. And we see them at the beginning of the book, happy together. We see an announcement of a divorce, and when we see the kind of aftermath. And my heroine, Effie, is the baby of the family. She's the youngest of 3 siblings, and she has not got over her parents splitting up. She's in her 20s, and she sort of feels like she should be able to deal with this, but she just can't. And when her kind of dad's new girlfriend, with whom she does not get along, announces that they're selling the family home, which is a massive shock to her, and that they're throwing this party and then fails to invite her properly, she takes complete umbrage and says she's not going to go to the party. She's not in touch with her family anymore. It's a very sad situation. But then she remembers her childhood treasure of her Russian dolls, and they are in the family house. And if she doesn't go and rescue them, they might be lost. So she sets up, and this is where my kind of, love of ridiculous comedy comes in. She sets up a kind of Mission Impossible task that she will creep in. She will dress in black. This party will be going on. She will shimmy to the hiding place where she left her Russian dolls, grab them and exit. And it's all supposed to take 5 minutes. And that would be quite a short book. And instead, she can barely even make it into the party. And there's a kind of just escalating chapter of accidents, misadventures, and lots of discovering about her family as a fly on the wall. And that's what really changes things for her, because she had all kinds of preconceptions about her family. And the more she witnesses this party on the edges of it, the more she kind of changes. Anyway, I won't spoil the book, but there's a lot of her creeping around a party. Let's put it like that.
Can we talk about comedic writing? You are so wonderful at creating these characters who are full of heart, completely realistic, and putting them in hilarious, even over the top situations without making it seem insane. And one thing, I had a problem with my novel, The Jet Setters, because I was making fun of the characters to get laughs. And so in my first draft, the editor said, you're making fun of them and we're supposed to care about them. And I got wonderful advice to try to be kinder to them. Do you have any advice for those of us who are trying to write like you, who are trying to be funny, but still keep heart in the book?
It's really tricky. I do. I mean, when you're writing in a certain, perhaps, milieu or social setting, and you're having people behaving badly, sometimes it can be hard to sympathize with them. I mean, I think that what I tend to do is root the narrative in one character, and I always have to love her despite her flaws. And I think that's where I always start off. So, I mean, Effie is not perfect. She's stubborn and she hasn't really grown up, and she takes offense, and she's sort of a bit of a drama queen, really. The book would be a lot shorter if she just said, you know what, I'm just going to be the big person and put everything aside. And in fact, she does think, should I be the big person? And then she thinks, no, I'm not going to be the big person. That's her standing. That's where she starts off. But I think that hopefully you see enough of what she's been through to sympathize with her. And I think that's thing to kind of explain it, because I think if you know why someone's behaving badly, then you're going to just root for them all the more, and then perhaps go with them. And I think what I always try and do with my characters is start off with things that anybody is going to relate to, and make the sort of the introduction to them something that feels grounded and real, and you're like, oh, I get that as a reader. Like, yeah, I could be that. That's how I would react. I would feel like that. And then that's when you perhaps have the confidence to take them into an OTT place, and hope that you've kind of established enough of a bond with the reader that they'll just go with you, and they won't go, wait, what now? You're hiding under a table? Really? And I'm sure I do lose readers along the way, by the way, who are like, oh, for goodness sake, but I think enough people are just like on the roller coaster, and they enjoy the ride, and it kind of slightly.
That's so interesting. That's really great advice, actually, to be sure at the beginning to bring the reader along. That's actually something I've never thought of.
I suppose I'm always just trying to think, if I were a reader, what would appeal to me? And I think I want to kind of feel like, yeah, this character I'm with, they could be my friend, and I get them. I'm not completely alien to them. It depends what you're writing, though, because sometimes you want to read about someone that you're just entertained by them, full stop, and you don't need to empathize. But then I think that's a different kind of comedy. That's kind of much more laughing at or cringing, or whereas I kind of always want my reader to be going along with.
Your books are so hilarious and so fun. Were you always the life of the party?
Actually, no. I mean, it took me a while to kind of find comedy for myself, or maybe to realize that I had a comedic view on life, because I thought my view on life was like just normal, like everybody thought like this. And I do remember when I was like a teenager, I would say things just like almost like in all innocence, like that's my take on this, and people would laugh, and I would be surprised. I would think, oh, is that funny? Oh, maybe it is. And so gradually I kind of worked this out, that I was kind of entertaining people. And I think I've always loved the absurd, the ridiculous. I like being flippant. What can I say? I am the person with the inappropriate flippant comment at any time. So
that's wonderful. Do you like a huge party with a Versailles themed dinner table, or do you like a few friends? Or my perfect party might be a cup of tea and a great novel. So what's yours?
It depends what I'm actually there for. If I want to talk to friends, actually, I think you're right, a few, and then you really get to catch up with them. But I am a sucker for a kind of theatrical party. I really admire the people that really have, like, I don't know, a fancy dress theme, or they've hired a beautiful venue, or it turns into more than just like catching up with friends. It's like a performance, it's an experience. But I kind of sometimes do feel like the fly on the wall at those, because they can be overwhelming. If there are loads of people that you don't know. I'm a terrible networker. I'm the worst person at going, hello, important person. I'm me. I never do that. So I'll be the one at the side looking, maybe under the console table.
Okay, perfect. Tell me, was there any example of a scene in The Party Crasher that you really felt, brought it to the dinner table with you, or had to figure out the physical comedy of how it would work? Can you give us an example of a time that it kind of bled into your non-writing time?
Well, I would say that it always bleeds into my non-writing time. I mean, I walk around, I mouth dialogue. I'm always like thinking kind of when I'm in the throes of the book. I find it hard to separate. I have boundary issues, let's put it like that. But I would
Me too.
The scene that really preoccupied me and maybe took over my life for a bit, and I was drawing diagrams and I was thinking it through and angles and almost like directing a film, was this scene as a big set piece in the book where Effie, my heroine, is desperate to see her family at their grand dinner, and it's just the family dinner. So it's all the kind of main characters. And because she's not supposed to be there, she hides under the console table in the dining room and watches them all. And just working out, who she could see, what they were going to reveal. And then gradually a couple of the people at the dining table notice her. So it was a kind of feat of, I think, choreography as much as
yes.
As much as deciding who's thinking what and what do we want to reveal. It was kind of like, boom, boom, this happens.
This angle, and this person has to walk toward the table.
Yeah, but
I love that you had to draw diagrams. That is wonderful.
Yeah, because the thing is, it has to be exact and real, I think. Otherwise, you're letting the reader down.
So tell me about how the idea began. You've talked about wanting to have a dysfunctional family, wanting to go to a party. For this novel, and for any novel, how does it work for you that you're kind of thinking, where do I want to escape next? Is that how it starts? Or did you see Effie, or did you have a friend in that situation? How does it start for you?
No, I feel the same way. I always have to kind of think, what's a little flaw of mine that I could maybe exaggerate or build on. And certainly I do have a kind of stubborn streak. I'm very diplomatic like Bean, actually. I'm quite similar to Effie's big sister Bean, but I do have a moment where I will dig in, not necessarily rationally, a kind of irrational little streak. So I was able to sympathize with that. And then I really wanted it to be the story of a family as much as of a heroine. So I wanted to feel that, what's really, I think, resonated with a lot of readers is the idea of selling off the family home. Mm-hmm. And I have done that. My family has a couple of times moved from a house in which we've been for a lot of time, like a big span. When I was 15, we left the house that we'd been in since I was 6, and that felt a really big deal. And then in my own family, we and packing up and the memories and all of that. And it's a sort of there's a sort of grief, underlying the comedy. There's a sort of pain, and I do think that you need both, and almost the more outrageous your comedy, the more it needs to be rooted in a kind of some form of pain, whether it's just embarrassment or whether it's something deeper. And it's really sort of Effie realizing that you will suffer loss in life, but it will be okay. Things will move on and they will change. And I think that refers to the house, and it refers to her and her family. So that was the kind of driving sort of narrative, really. And so I follow everybody's story, not just Effie's. And then there were a few specific kind of references. For example, the attics in this house. So when I'm devising a book where someone's got to hide from her family, there is the kind of logistics issues. It's like, well, where's she going to hide? If she was in one of those houses, like these minimalist houses with like one chair, this book would not happen. So luckily for her and for me, it's the opposite. It's a cluttered Victorian house, and it has all these attics, and that comes from my childhood. So the house that we sold when I was 15, we had clambered around the attics because they were unused. And you could actually just about squish from one attic to another attic and then peep out the door, just like in the book, except we never put a bar in any of ours. That was me. Right. Well, we made a trick.
And so, what was the first image? Does it work like that for you? Do you use index cards? How does that does that happen when you're first dreaming up a new book?
It's such a mixture. I'm such a magpie. You know,
You
I'm not
sit
really
down and just start typing and type your way into it?
No, the opposite. I walk around. I walk and I think, and I sit in coffee shops and I scribble notes, and I do think it's all got to kind of come to you naturally. I can't just sit down at a screen and think, new book, right, here I go. That would freak me out. I have to let the book come to me almost. So I'll have
I feel the same way.
And there's always a kind of what if and a big idea, and then I let that sit for a bit and I think, is that really a big idea, or was that just like too many marketers? Because I've had a few that and I mean, it just kind of, you know, different ideas. I'm thinking about her character, I'm thinking about the house, I'm thinking about the family. I did some research, because if you're going to write a book where somebody is so estranged from their family that they won't go to the big family party, then you better have a good reason. And so I kind of looked into adult children of divorce, and I found a really interesting kind of groundswell of children who were kind of quite traumatized by their parents' divorce, but felt unable to vocalize this because they felt that they were adults. So they were fine with it, and they were putting on a brave face. And it was so interesting for me to come across this whole kind of tranche of material and forums. And so I did a lot of that. I thought about the house, and it all kind of built up. And I am a real planner, so I'm happy to plan and think, and for quite a while before I sit down.
And tell me about how you write. So you have children, as I do. Do you hide under a console table when it's time to try to write? Do you have an office? Do you have hours of the day? What's your writing schedule like?
Well, it depends which stage I'm at. So if I'm just thinking, it's kind of all the time, but none of the time, you know. I might wake up with a great idea. And actually, my children have got used to me sort of going, wait, shh. And I'll either sit down, dictate it into the phone, whatever it is.
Yes.
And then I do like file cards when I come to actually planning.
Me too.
Kind of addictive, and you just stand back and move around. I think that's quite satisfying.
Yes.
And then when I start, this is my little superstition. I won't sit down to write the first chapter until I have the first line, because I can't actually deal with the stress of sitting down and thinking, oh, what's the first line? So I walk around, I kind of avoid the computer. And then when I have the first line, I go to the computer and I sit down, and then really quickly I write it out. And then it's like, oh, I'm started. So it's a kind of psychological trick.
That is such a great idea. I love that. You have given so much useful advice to anyone in the audience who might want to be a writer.
Oh, well,
any other words of wisdom for people who are thinking of trying to write themselves?
Well, I mean, honestly, I think we can only speak for how we do it. But what I've always done is just think, well, what kind of book would I like to read? And just be guided by that. And, you know, I used to kind of really, when I was starting out, I would actually visualize the book. I would think, you know, this kind of book. And that's what I just think everybody should do. Think if they walked into a bookshop, what would make them jump up and down and think, I have to have this?
Yes.
You know, it might be plot, it might be a great character, it might be, you know, kind of slim volume of poetry, whatever it is, write that and please yourself. Make yourself laugh, make yourself excited by the plot, and then hopefully other people will be too.
Well, you are writing exactly what I want to be reading, honestly,
right back at you, can I just say? Tension, amazing description. I should kind of to explain to anybody watching that I have just been reading The Lifeguards, coming soon by Amanda, which is gripping. And I love reading a book with a really engrossing plot that kind of unfolds. I love that, and that's where you have such skill. And I love all the playing around with the points of view and like revealing.
Thank you.
And, you know, and as a reader, you're like, I bet it's that. Oh no, I'm wrong. I love playing with the reader. So, you know, and I love learning from books as well. You can always learn.
Any books that you're loving these days? What are you reading right now?
Well, I mean, I just finished yours. I've been reading some,
and the check is in the mail for mentioning that. Exactly. Thank you. It's out in April.
when I'm going to sleep at night, I always reread. And I think the reason is that I get so into books that and my heart starts pounding and I have to know what happens. And so I read those, fresh books, shall we say, during the daytime.
Yeah.
And then in the evening, I will read something like P.G. Wodehouse, or I'm just reading a Nancy Mitford.
Oh, great.
Agatha Christie's, which, by the way, don't make my heart pound because they're just so relaxed. And I've read them before. I can't remember who did it. So that's always. So it's really interesting. I find that I really value rereading, actually. And I say this to my children. I say, don't be scared to reread a book, because you get something different the second, third, fourth, fifth time, reading it. You might pick up the details.
You have read a book 5 times. I have never reread a book, except the ones I'm working on.
I would say I have read some books 20 times over my lifespan.
What?
Yeah. I've read Alice in Wonderland probably 50 times.
But you know what happens.
I don't mind. I like the words. I like the vocabulary. I pick something up new. I love rereading.
So have you ever started and abandoned a novel?
Not, I would say, I haven't got that far as to say I've started the novel. I think what I have done is worked on planning a novel quite a long way, and then thought, no, this isn't going to work. I wouldn't say I ever feel I abandon them. I put them to one side because I sometimes think that, then you can harvest some of the ideas, or even just one idea from that work or that thought process you can maybe use again, or it wasn't right at the time. So I have a file of kind of, ideas that haven't quite had their moment, but I've never, thank goodness yet, sort of written 20, 30, 40,000 words and had to just junk the whole lot. I do have friends who have done this, and I think it's quite traumatic. But once you know. I mean, if you're not happy with it, you can't live with it. You have to just do this right.
And so you have so many beloved characters. Can you talk a minute about how you create your characters, and if you're planning to return to any characters we love anytime soon?
Well, it's funny. I don't really know how I do it. I think I really write a lot by instinct. So rather than I'm not the person who sits and writes the character Bible and things that I kind of hear people talking about, and they kind of like have a whole history, like back in 1943 they did this.
Right.
I think I get into them by writing down their dialogue. I come into them through the way they think, the way they respond, what they say, and that's how I find them. I kind of hear them. I think it's like I hear them, and then they kind of start fleshing out. But I feel like I'm meeting them rather than like, oh, okay, I need somebody who will do this and this and this, because I'm not sure that I feel real enough. It's more like I'm sure that my subconscious is putting together elements of all the people I've met in my whole life and thinking, okay, a bit of you and a bit of you. But it doesn't feel like that. It feels like you're kind of almost, the whole person, the whole character is there. They're just a bit fuzzy around the edges or a bit transparent. And as you think more and more about them, they come into focus and you see them, but you're not inventing bits and bolting them on.
Yes, that's exactly how I feel. Exactly. And I just did a panel with someone where she said, then I spent a few months doing character work. And I said, what is that?
Yes, that's what I was.
My character work is writing the novel. I know I don't think about how they'll react. And the hardest thing with a crime-driven novel is making them do what they have to do for the plot to work, because they don't want to. And when you're uncovering a mystery, sometimes they have to go to a certain place and do something. And when you know a character, sometimes they won't do that, even though you planned it perfectly well. So it's hard to, that's exactly how it works for me, though, as if I'm getting to know them. I don't ever sort of think, what would they do? Sometimes I have to go back and write more backstory so that the reader understands why they did it. That has happened to me before. So what about returning to any characters we know, or are you working on a standalone? I have never written a second book of the same characters, and I kind of miss some of them.
Yes, I can imagine. I mean, I always feel a sense of loss whenever I deliver a book, actually, because I've kind of lived in this world and it's just been me and them, and my husband is the only other person. And we've been in this kind of little lovely garden where we've played around, and and then you're letting them into the world, and are you going to move on, or are you going to return? And the only character I've really ever returned to is Becky Bloomwood, who is my Shopaholic girl. And
what was the last one with her? We had
Christmas Shopaholic.
Oh yes, right. Okay.
Yeah. So that was one of the most fun books I've ever written in my life. That Shopaholic universe sort of feels open-ended, it feels like one of these ongoing series that I can just dip into, and it's all still going on. Whereas every other book has kind of felt like it's finished. I've told that story now. And so I miss the characters, and I wonder what they're up to, but I don't feel compelled to go back and actually write what they're up to. And I do get a lot of readers saying, could we have another one of these? And so far I haven't, because it feels self-contained.
I would like you to return to the house in the Party Crasher, because that house, I feel like I know it so well, and all the hidden spaces and places to hide things and places to hide and vantage points, and maybe another family, the next family.
Oh, actually, do you know, I really like that idea. I love it. That house, I don't know, it really got under my skin too when I was writing it, because I think where you grow up is just so seminal wherever it is. And then if it's the kind of a house that, Effie is so protective of it, because some people with no taste call it ugly. And so she's very defensive, and you've got to love the kind of the underdog house, which is just a bit grotesque.
So before we wrap up, one of my favorite parts of all of your work are these incredible specifics, these moments and works of art that can only happen in a Sophie Kinsella novel. And in The Party Crasher, one of the many pieces I loved was the kitchen cabinets that Mimi painted. Can you describe them and the first time that she drew something?
Well, this came about because I wanted a kind of a symbol of family life, which, I won't give away what happens to it, but I needed to create something within the house that was a real sort of, important emotional component, and I wanted it to be art. But I wanted it to be down to earth. And I think that what I really like is things that feel kind of real, not grand, but just might have grown organically out of family life. And so Mimi, Effie's beloved stepmother, just sort of doodles a little picture on a cupboard, the kind of thing that any of us might do. Just, I had a phase of when I was sort of trying to keep a child quiet, like on the bus or, in a concert or something, I would just doodle cats, and I would just doodle cats again and again and again, and be kind of interested enough to watch me doing it. And I can't draw, but it kind of kept them quiet. And then I imagined, well, what if somebody could draw? What if you had an artist in the family? What might they create? And one temptation would be that they create something beautiful and grand, but I wanted it to be real. It's with Sharpie. She's just with Sharpie here and there creates magic on kitchen cupboards in a way that only the family would really see the preciousness of it, and then the family can join in and add little bits. And for me, it just kind of really symbolized what happens in a house. Something builds up. It almost like those charts you have in kitchens where with the height, and you've written the height line, written the names, and somebody walking past would think, well, what's that scribble? And for them, it's like precious. Yeah. And this is actually beautiful. So it is beautiful, but it's also quite individual to them. And I just had really fun sort of picturing it.
I love it. Well, that's just one of the many things I loved about The Party Crasher. And I can't wait to see what you write next. And I can't wait for us to be able to fly around the world and hopefully meet in person someday.
I would love that. It's been so much fun talking. This has just been the best. It really has. And right back at you. I think we could talk about writing all day. So
I do too. And kids and hiding from kids and margaritas. So cheers to you. Happy holidays. And thank you so much.
You too. Thank you. This has been awesome. Thanks a lot.